Welcome back to the Leather Shop. I'm your host, Matt Roach, here with Matt Demio from Mattia. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Right
That
on.
name is a tongue twister as I tried to practice it before the episode and still kind of probably botched it.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
close enough.
so
Works for
give me a
me.
little bit. How did you come up with this name? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so this name's actually just my name, right? My name's Matthew Demio. But my heritage is Puerto Rican and Italian, so I took the name Matthew and used those spellings of it from each language. So Mateo in Spanish, Mattia in Italian. This means Matthew. Um, and yeah, fun little twist on my name.
That is a really cool mix up of heritages.
Yeah, yeah.
That is like you got like one of the meccas of cooking.
Oh, you have no idea. I don't
I
know
feel like
how.
that mix I would weigh 3,000
I was just
pounds if
about to
I had
say,
that background.
I don't know how I'm not 400 pounds. It's just good food around me at all times.
Yeah, wow, good for you. Now I want to be invited to some family parties because I can only imagine how amazing that food
Oh,
is.
it's the best. The
So
best.
I am glad that we got to, chat some. So, tell everybody kind of how you ended up here. I know how you ended up here, but how did you end up in leathercraft?
In leathercraft. It's like, I'd say, a short, long story. Essentially, through years of different design school, I ended up in fashion school. Fashion school, I decided, ooh, corporate fashion's evil, and I don't want to be a part of it. And I started making stuff. I mean, luckily in school, I went to FIT in Manhattan, Fashion Institute of Technology. Luckily, it's one of those places where they actually teach you how to make things rather than just design things. So I had a pretty solid foundation of how to be a maker and a creator, and how to apply that to the fashion world, and kind of took that and ran with it. Obviously, still so much to learn after that when I started my business. But yeah, that's the the gist of it. Is didn't want to work in corporate fashion, rather make stuff.
What we kind of bonded over was the fact that your specialty was footwear design.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how I ended up in fashion school. I wanted to be a footwear designer. I wanted to work for Nike, work for someone like that. And the program I was in at FIT was called accessory design. So if I wanted to be a footwear designer, I had to take all the classes that revolved accessories. So handbags, every type of footwear, belts, wallets, everything in between, fashion accessories. Um, and there I started falling in love with making things like handbags. I'd never even sat at a sewing machine before that, truly, or an industrial sewing machine. And then I got thrown into this class with hundreds of sewing machines and said, go, figure it out. And it was an amazing time in my life to be able to explore and have access to all this equipment and all these labs and do something I've never done before, and be able to take a different approach to something I wanted to create, because I wanted to make shoes. I wanted to make or to design shoes and design accessories, and I ended up falling in love with the craft of making them more than just designing them.
So when you just said sitting at all the machines, my mind clearly just went to this ginormous room at FIT that has like one of every sewing machine like ever made. Like, is there like how many machines they must have hundreds, if not thousands of machines there because
Yeah,
FIT is huge.
yeah. So I mean, like, my major had its own labs with its own machines. So I mean, there's probably thousands upon thousands of machines at FIT, and all the different, the fashion, all the different fashion majors and menswear and this and that. But we, excuse me, in particular had three labs, um, and one lab was just for footwear focused and like all the machines to make shoes. One was just handbag accessories, so like mainly handbags, but belts, wallets, things like that. And then the third lab was like a mix between handbags and headwear or millinery, so making hats, um, which is probably the thing I did least there, was make hats.
So, like, when I think of that, like, in terms of going and seeing all those things, for most of us, we're not exposed to as many machines. We kind of
Yeah,
we rely on friends, coworkers, the internet of what's the best machine for us. Do you
absolutely.
think that changed how you approach building out your workshop? When, like, you put stuff in there, you knew the types of brands, the type of machines. Do you think that helped facilitate getting that off the ground?
I definitely think it helped initially, right? But there's still so much untapped when it comes to machines and equipment and everything, right? There's so like we all learn something new every day, and I was still constantly learning. But yeah, it gave me a foundation that I think a lot of people don't get outside of YouTube or the internet. You know?
No, that's completely true. So, like, when you did that and you think of, like, the tools and machines and all the things you got experience to and all your years now, what do you think the one machine that changed everything about how you approach the craft? Like, is there a single machine that you think kind of moved the needle for you in one direction? Like, was it a sewing machine? Was it a skiver? Was it a clicker press? Was it
Ooh,
like
I mean, all like everything you just named to move my company in a new direction. So it's hard to say. I don't think there was one, right? Um, every time I got a machine, it was for a purpose that I was going to use, and it was an investment, and it wasn't, maybe I'll use this. Well, that's not true. I still have some machines that are maybe I'll use this, but all the ones you named, right? So like walking foot sewing machine was probably my first really big purchase, and that thing is my workhorse. It's a tech, so I use the crap out of it. And then after that, um, probably, yeah, probably my clicker press. It's funny. I went to buy a Skyver and ended up buying a clicker press at the same place. So I got this at the same time. And those machines are incredibly valuable. The clicker press has allowed me to scale my business to huge extents. And yeah, it's a monster of a machine. It weighs as much as a Honda Civic, so it's a pain
well, it's like
to
you got a 20-ton, right? You have a huge one.
27 ton. Yeah,
Woo.
it's like one of the biggest in the class you can get for swing arm. I think it's the biggest swing arm clicker press you can buy.
Where'd you get that? I've seen them at, like, was it Campbell Randall, or like, there's a couple
Yeah.
places that I've seen them,
Um,
but they're enormous.
well, luckily, unluckily, in New York, when I started my business 10 years ago, uh, a lot of factories were closing at the end of their lives. And I started just buying out places, old factories, would show up to buy one thing and end up buying a whole bunch of other stuff. So for me, I benefited, but it was so sad to see those companies go. This factory was like upstate-ish New York, I found, and they had a skiving machine, and then I got there and I was like, oh, you're a full factory that has every piece of equipment I could ever need. Um, and I ended up buying a few things, but like at the time didn't have the funds to go all out like I wish I could have.
Yeah, like, for me, the first thing that I did was I, like, had, like, a large order, so I got a clicker press,
Mhm.
and that was amazing. Like, that, like, made things so simple, and I knew the next machine I was gonna get. So, originally, I wanted a Skyver, and I was like, "Oh, maybe." But now I have the Cobra Class 26, that's coming in, and I'm, like, so excited to use it. But it's funny because I was talking, to you and others, and they were telling me how it's such a different experience using an industrial sewing machine, like a leather sewing machine, versus your at home, like, Singer or
Oh
anything
yeah,
like that. They're just so different. Like, everything
miles
is
miles
different.
different. Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think was now? Did you have experience sewing before school, or was the leather sewing machine your first experience on a sewing machine?
No, I did it. I mean, maybe like when I was a kid, like hand sewing stuff or messing around on my mom's little portable sewing machine here and there, but not really. Maybe I'd sewn once before that for like a school project and other design school stuff, but no, yeah, I was just thrown into a lab and I remember vividly this the teacher bringing us all around, teaching us how to thread the machine, and then saying go. It wasn't like this is how you do it. And at that time, I'm sure it's still like this at FIT. It was all clutch motors on the machine. Like servo motors didn't exist. No one had that. I mean, still going to many factories, people don't have servo motors. So it's like strapping a car engine onto a sewing machine, and you tap the pedal and it takes off. So being able to hone that is a whole different craft, a whole different set of skills, and it's a pain. Um,
Yeah, that's the thing
thank
that's the
goodness for
hard.
servo motors.
And that's the stressful part too, is because there's so many. It's so different. Like for in my experience, like I once I kind of just like you didn't really have to worry about like there wasn't many tension issues. There was like it was very basic on like your old school singer. Like I never. I
Hmm.
mean, granted, I was just fortunate. I didn't encounter many issues when I used it. Like with my grandmother back in the day.
Yeah,
Um, but it seems like there's so much more that goes into learning on you know the sewing machines that everybody uses versus like you're at home. It seems like it's a lot more like you don't just go willy nilly from one thing to the next. Like there's a lot of fine tuning to make sure you get everything exactly right.
yeah.
Um, and it seems like that is probably the hardest part. Like you're not just going to just switch things out every like 10 minutes. It's like it's a cumbersome process.
Yeah, I mean, once you form a good relationship with your machine, as I like to say, like you can, right? I've gotten pretty comfortable with it to know exactly where to turn the tension dials and how to adjust the bobbin pressure, like the bobbin pressure or the bobbin tension, excuse me, um, for different thread size, different needle size, different sewing lengths, depending on what I'm sewing. Uh, I don't like doing it. I wish I could just sit down and it's ready every time, but I've gotten pretty efficient at it. But it takes a while to learn that too. That's a whole other skill is just learning your sewing machine. But I also, besides it's like liking the craft, I like the mechanics of it. So I enjoy taking apart sewing machines and figuring out how they work and how to rebuild them and how to fix them.
Yeah, it's kind of like having kids. I feel like the way we just like describe this, it's almost like it's temperamental like a kid. Like you need to just like, it's like we oiling it is like kind of like feeding your kid. It's like a, you're kind of always tiptoeing, hoping that it's gonna like sort of keep it together until it has just like a complete blowout, and it's just like I'm just not having this, like a
Yeah,
big meltdown. That's pretty much like how I envision it. For all
that's
you
awesome.
parents out there listening, you probably understand too, and you're like, "Yep, they're exactly the same, exactly the same." Um, so, kind of on the same thing we were talking about, with machines. You do so much stuff by hand. What's the hand tool that you, or the thing that you started working with, where you noticed the biggest difference the quality of the
Ooh,
tool makes?
that's a great question. I haven't thought about this in a while because my hand tools are like extensions of me. I just grab them and don't think about it anymore.
It's true, and if you
Um,
once you have a good one you have for years, you probably kind of forget the bad memories. It's like the same reason why people continue to have kids. You forget what the first year is like.
I don't know. I think there's also like such a big learning curve with leather tools, right? So you
Yeah.
think a tool might suck, right? And just like, wow, this is awful. And then you touch it, like you pick it up 2 years later after you've been working with leather for that long, and you're like, this thing is the easiest tool to use. And you just realize you didn't know how to use it properly or have this skill yet. And there's a lot of tools like that. There's a lot of like low end tools out there that you think are awful, and then I pick up a couple years later and I can glide through a piece of leather like butter, like edgers or something like that. Um, this is a good question though. I'm trying to think.
Edges are temperamental too. Like that's one of those things where it's almost like it's a machine. You need to have a relationship with your edger. Like you need to get it
Absolutely.
just sharp enough, like especially like no, actually I'd say both, like French and, just like the edge bevelers. They're temperamental.
Yeah, yeah.
You
They
need
they
to
really are. I mean, just
sharpen it.
because leather is so temperamental, right? Every piece of leather is different, so it's all going to be treated differently every time you go
That
to
is
edge it.
that is
Um,
true.
it's not necessarily the tool, you know. It could be the material, but I think maybe one of my knives, right? So my building neighbor is a knife maker,
Could that
And
be any better for you? A
yeah,
knife maker right next door?
he makes like super beautiful works of art, high end kitchen knives. They're incredible. His
Do you have an
craft is
iron throne
amazing.
over there? Has he finally, like, built, like, a massive iron
You
throne that you
should.
could
There's just
yeah.
like piles of knives that like didn't meet quality control. That I'm like, could be a pretty cool iron throne.
Does he sharpen all your knives for you?
No, he taught me how to sharpen my knives. Got me. He's like, this is the right equipment. He bought me all the right, sharpening stones and this and that. Taught me the right angles because obviously he's like, I don't want to sharpen your knives. You use them every day. You'd be knocking on my door once a
That is
week.
true. Yeah, can you sharpen
um,
and it's not easy either. It's, like, that itself is a skill, and not an
Absolutely,
easy one either.
it's unbelievable how much how hard it is to sharpen leather knives, or how much work just has to go into it to get a proper edge on it. But yeah, so he just like whipped up a leather knife for me one day. Saw what I was using, came up with like a really simple design out of like some super crazy high grade steel I know nothing about. I don't know anything about knife making, but I use it every day. I all the knives I've bought off of every leatherworking website, I still have them. I just don't use them nearly as much as his. Um, it's also like, I don't know. It's really meaningful too to have such a good neighbor who's just a really good person who went out of his way to do this for me. Um, so
Oh,
it's a really
I couldn't
special
agree
tool.
more.
Uh, but yeah, I use it every single day. I have to sharpen it half as much as the best knives out there, and it works great. Couldn't
We
be
always
happier with it.
joke, like, my friends, how, like, when I was this is when I was younger. My goal in life, like, everybody would say, "Hey, I want to take over the world. I want to do this." And I was like,
Yeah,
"I want to have a guy for everything." Like, I
yeah,
want to have a shoe guy, a knife guy. Like, I want a guy for everything. Like, you want a dry cleaner? I got the guy.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I always wanted to, I don't know if it was, like, maybe, like, old school, like, watched The Godfather too many times, but I just wanna be like, "He's a friend of this." Like, I just always wanted to have a guy for everything. There was this guy who, grew up in the neighborhood, and he knew literally everyone. He's like, "Oh, you need a dumpster? I got, Bill. He'll be here within the hour." He literally had a guy for everything, and I was never more envious than that.
I do sometimes feel like that is me. I've got a guy for everything. Whatever you need, I can get it.
Yeah, it's like, "You got a septic issue? I got a guy."
I got a
Like,
guy.
you gotta have a guy for everything in life. Like, there's nothing cooler. Like, somebody could say, "I got a lot of money," but the ultimate flex is being like,
I
"No,
got
I got a watch guy and a septic guy."
yeah,
Like,
whatever
I
you
got a
whatever you
guy.
need.
Yeah. Like, I got a blade guy. I actually need to, actually, I do wanna eventually, I have a note of types of people I wanna have on, and a bladesmith is one of them because it's so important to everything we do, yet most of us don't know much about blades and knives and all the things that go into how we do our jobs
That's so
every
true.
single day. It's funny
Yeah.
how, like, the most unsafe thing you can have in your workbench is a dull knife,
Yep. Yep. I
you
couldn't
know?
agree more. Yeah.
And
I mean,
I
people don't think like they get upset when their knives get dull. You're cutting something that is so durable. Every time you make a cut, it's dulling your knife. There's no steel out there that's strong enough, right? Like you're cutting
yeah.
all the tannins, everything that's in leather is made to just dull a knife. It's a battle we have that's forever gonna be. We're never gonna beat that fight.
And I am a terrible knife sharpener. Like, I've
Yeah.
tried, and I can never get the edge right. I always somehow screw it up. I remember when I first got the Charter made one, I
Mhm.
think Rocky Mountain sells it or something. And the first cut I did with it, I stropped it a few times first, and that thing eviscerated leather. It was like 6-ounce leather, and
Yeah.
it cut through like it was a piece of paper.
Yep.
And now it still cuts, but it's just not even nearly as sharp as it
Yeah.
used to. And it's basically user error because I'm not a good sharpener.
Mhm.
And it's hard because most places will sharpen kitchen knives,
Yeah.
but not a lot of people will take a leather knife.
Yep.
Like, there was a guy locally I called and I was like, "Hey, can you sharpen this?" He goes, "I don't have any experience with those."
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Like,
true, and
I mean, I guess somebody
they don't
who's,
wanna ruin it.
I guess, very skilled, knife smiths and blacksmiths or anybody who's in that field could probably do it. Maybe they just only have experience with kitchen knives and they didn't want to risk it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting. Like it's a huge skill that like a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
Um, so what are you working on these days? What's got the excitement going? Not what pays the bills. What's the fun
What's
side? What are you working on that's keeping you up at night thinking of
Oh
something fun to
man,
work on?
that's a forever problem. I'm always working on something different. I have the worst ADD imaginable. So there's like always, you know, halves or quarters of projects just sitting around. Just started up some men's bags last night again. So I made some really, you know, uh, for years I've been making men's satchels, men's messenger bags. Um, but I've never felt like I've perfected it or made it unique enough or different enough. Um, so I've been trying to just figure out how to simplify it, make it as simple as possible, super elegant. Anyone can carry it, but you know, you could throw it off a building and have it run over by a train, and it will be fine. Um,
So you're
so
talking the really old school, like walking in midtown, going to work messenger bag, like those things that were just
yeah,
like my grandfather had one and it was thick.
yeah,
Like it
exactly.
was like built for it tough. Like so you're
Yeah.
talking like the single gusset, old
Yep.
school flip over the top messenger bag type thing.
Yep, yep. Like I had all these different designs, like double gussets, all these pockets, all this crap, and I was just like, this is driving me nuts. It's not efficient. I want to be able to make, actually make these and not spend a week making a bag. There are people who do that at that level, and they make the most beautiful bags on earth, but that's not me.
That
So,
terrifies me.
so I want to. I mean, they charge thousands upon thousands for them, rightfully so. They're works of art. But again, that's not me. So trying to figure out how to make, that's my balance these days is trying to figure out how to make something beautiful and unique and functional that I can also scale and make at larger quantities just because that's how business works. That's how I'm gonna make my bread and butter. So right now I've just been retooling some men's bags, trying to figure out the sizing still, whether it's a quarter of an inch or 2 inches in some directions. It's every bit matters. So yeah, that's what's been keeping me up right now is men's bags. Eventually, um, there are some like simple women's totes I've been doing. Um, just like really simple. I call them the mini totes, but I paint them. So I do a lot of painting on leather, and that's the other side of things too. But I'd say that's a little different, right? That's like uh, my artistic release. When I'm frustrated with those men's bags or something super technical I'm doing for a client, I just go paint, and it's so much fun and so much stress relief. And those bags probably do better than anything I make or sell, which is great because I really enjoy making them. Um, but that's the other side of thing. But I think that's more of like a not keeping me up thing. That's a you know natural flow of work thing.
So when you paint the like say the woman's totes,
Mhm.
what is your do you use different I'm assuming you might use different paints for the panel piece versus the edges versus like do you have multiple different kinds of paints that you
Yeah.
you link in? So like if you were making a woman's tote right now, what are your go-to products for seeing that all the way through?
Um, some good veg tan to start. I only do it on natural veg for the most part. Um, and yeah, just like your typical leather dyes, right? Your Thievings, your Angelus, however you pronounce that brand. Um, those, and I'll find different ways to mix them too, like mix them together, mix them with other ingredients, play around a lot, um, explore with those. But also, like, I'd say it's more in the techniques of how to put the dye on or the paint on. I use a mix of dyes and paints and brushes and daubers and uh, wool and felt and everything you can imagine. It's like a fun little arts and crafts studio. But you gotta explore. That's the fun of it. And then on the other side of that, I use a lot of graffiti products. So like
Interesting.
crink markers, things like that, all sorts of paints. They have really good applicators. I know a lot of people have used them for like the tokenol hacks where they fill them with tokenol and
I
like
100% do that all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
It's like my
So
go-to hack.
so I've been using those like it was great that people bought that hack to me because I'd never thought about it. I've been using those paint markers for the past 15 years and I've never thought like, oh, why don't I just put that in it? So whoever bought that to the table, genius. But yeah, so I use a lot of different stuff, a lot of different techniques. Like can't tell you everything, and I'd have to kill you.
I
Um,
mean, that's understandable. Like you can't
but
no, you can't give away the secret sauce, but you can work around it.
yeah, yeah.
For me, like Angelus, I've always loved Angelus. I used it from sneakers,
Mhm.
and I use it for all my panels, but I probably apply it a little bit different than you. It sounds like you use a lot of different applicators where I tend to either use brushes or I use like an Awada air sprayer.
Yeah.
And I have been using those for years. My buddy, um, who's my co-host on the Sneaker Podcast, Sab One. If you haven't seen his artistic work and you're listening, go check him out at Sab_1. He is an amazing artist.
Mhm.
Um, and he was the guy that kind of put me onto a lot of this stuff. And he was the guy that swore by this one. The precision you can get with the air sprayer
So
is unbelievable.
I should add that in. Our mutual friend Miriam, who's an amazing leather worker, she was boxing up a bunch of stuff she was moving and sent me a air sprayer, like a mini compressor with the whatever you call them, the airbrush guns and everything. And
What a sweet.
I've been using the crap out of it, and it is amazing. And I'm like, why have I not had this sooner? Yeah, she's the best. She's like, I'm not using it. It's gonna end up, either given away or the trash. So she sent
What
it to
brand
me.
was it?
I have no idea. It's an old one. It didn't really have many labels
Nothing's
on
really
it.
changed in like 30
Yeah, yeah,
years. Like
exactly.
air sprayers or air sprayers.
Yeah,
I use the Iwata. I know that Grex is another really big brand too. That's why I asked. And there's different types too. Somebody who's going to be on an episode, Sabwan actually will be on an episode, and he's going to give us the ins and outs of the whole artistic side, the painting side.
that's awesome.
And he's got like 5 different kinds of air sprayers. He's
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
sponsored by Angelus.
that's
Um,
amazing. Oh wow.
so
Damn, I gotta
he
listen into that. I gotta, because I have no idea. I haven't even watched a how-to video on it or like anything. I just plugged it in, mixed up the dyes I wanted, plugged it all in, and just started going. And then I was like, "This is amazing!" And just having so much fun with it and getting such great results. Part of me thinks like this is a really interesting, cool way to do it and explore and learn my own ways and techniques. Um, so I haven't watched anything yet because of that. I'm like, let me just keep exploring. But now I gotta, now that I'm into it, I'm just like, I gotta see what else is out
so
there.
that episode is clearly for you. And Angelus, if you're
Yeah,
listening, like you should really be a sponsor. Maybe I should reach out to them. That probably would start the conversation if I actually reached out to them.
yeah.
The business side, it's not fun. Um, but yeah, that is and I abuse the heck out of that relationship. I call him all the time and just like, hey, so I did this. He's like, you're an idiot. Stop, do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm lucky he's one of my good friends, so I'm lucky that he is. Otherwise, he would probably kill me by now. Um, so I've used those religiously for going on close to 10 years, and I've gone back and forth on the edge paint side, and I like to hear where people end or if they even use it. Some people are strictly dye and burnish. I use Phoebing's. I ended up on Phoebing's Pro dye. I started with a ton of different dyes. I still use some Angelus. What do you use for the dye and paint on the edges?
I'm more of just a burnish with wax sort of guy. Um, really don't do much edge paint anymore. I'm just too impatient to let edge paint dry. But if I do want a matching color, I'll just dye it with whatever dye that matches. So Phoebings or Angelus.
Oh, so you
Um,
make your own dyes, colors.
no, I mean I'll just use a dauber, put it on, and then burnish over it, and it burnishes perfectly.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I want a matching color. Um, so yeah, or if I'm dyeing veg tan and I dyed it red, I'll just use that same dye, but I won't let it dry. So like I'll put it on the edge and then
Yeah.
start burnishing right away, and it works like a charm almost every time. Sometimes I'll wax burnish over it, um, but yeah, it's that I don't really edge paint or edge dye very much at all. Um, I
I think
had
there's
it. I
different
had
camps. There's different
Yeah,
camps. You're either an edge painter or a burnisher for the most part. And I mean, people do both, but I feel like you like one or the other.
yeah, yeah. Funny enough, I had edge painting machine.
Oh,
And it was just sitting on my shelf. And I was talking to Leanne and Nick so much about edge painting, I ended up selling it to them. I'm just like, it's just sitting here. I don't. It's just taking up space on my shelf. I have no use for it. And now, as far as I know, they use it a lot. So went to the right people,
I
Leanne and
need to
Nick of
ask. I need to
Hemlock and
talk to them
Hyde.
about it
Yeah, yeah.
because those machines, it's the consistency. Because the thing that always throws me off, and I'm sure I'll talk to a ton of people about this, is the crease in the middle. Even if you cut a straight edge, there's times where I'll still have like a dip in the middle, and it blows my mind how that can happen on a clean cut on a somewhat stiff veg tan. And painting was the one thing I thought coming into leathercraft that I'd find easy.
Yeah, yeah,
And I find that to be one of the hardest aspects is
yeah.
getting a clean edge paint. You're right, it's super
I
frustrating.
mean, at like scale, right? Using
Yeah.
a clicker die really solves that problem. But that's if you're scaling. If you're doing a one-off, everything you just said is, yeah, sanding and burnishing and doing all like 10 steps before you edge paint.
Well, it's crazy even when you do a clicker die and you put, it together and you line it up say perfectly.
Mhm.
In my experience is that it's always a slightly off. It's never perfect perfect. Like when you put the glue and you set it, even if it's a half a millimeter, it's like it's hard to get it perfectly flush. And I put it, next to like like I have the leather working jig, not the leather the woodworking jigs you get on Amazon, like those steel ones.
Okay.
And I put those together and I'll even just lean it up and push it in and it's still never precisely, it's very close, but it's very hard to get it exactly.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's
It's like
always a struggle. Again, excuse me. Leather is it's a natural material. Every piece is going to be different. They're all going to be treated different. They're all going to stretch different. Depends on where you cut it from the hide. Some parts of the hide are stretchy, some parts are stiff, some parts are fibrous, some parts aren't. So depends on where you're cutting it out of, what the different results
that
are.
felt like a Dr. Seuss book kind of. It's like some are tall, some are small, some are some are
Leather.
wide. Yeah, yeah. I feel like Dr. Seuss should have written like a leather book before he like passed away. Or maybe
That's
there's like some
funny.
context in some of his books that like you could probably like take from like
Yeah,
Green Eggs
right.
and Ham or something. I don't know.
Probably. There's
Yeah.
always there's always a lesson in Dr. Seuss.
The man, he's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
But no, that's true. Every leather is different, and you work with mostly just natural undyed veg, right? That's like kind of
Um,
your sweet spot.
so that's not. I wouldn't say mostly. I'd say that's what I enjoy the most, right?
Yeah,
Because most of my clients don't enjoy that the most. Um, if I'm doing large orders, excuse me. If I'm doing large orders, everyone wants the black or the brown, or they want the leather look and leather feel.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so I really enjoy working with natural veg tan, but I don't always get the chance to. I do tend to push people that way, but it'd be like it will look the way you want it to look. Just give it some time, right? Like use it, treat it how it's meant to be treated. But yeah, there's nothing I don't use. Natural veg, chrome tans. I use it all. A lot of oil tans. I really enjoy using. Pretty much everything and anything. You know.
yeah.
Um,
I got a hide recently from Weaver. I got one of the Weaver Select hides. They're English bridal dyed all the way through. Of course, I'm like your customers. I went straight black on black.
Yeah.
Mainly because like I knew I was getting the machine and I knew I was gonna have black thread, and I probably thought that like black would hide some of my missteps, and I was like, this would be a good thing that I can
Yeah.
learn and use. I'm assumed black thread would come with it, and I was like, I don't have to worry about color matching, and it was more of a simplicity thing.
Yeah.
Um, and the one thing that I noticed right from the start, so I know everybody uses Tokenol, and I haven't done this too much, but I got different results on a lot of different leathers for when you smooth out the back. You know, even if it's a finished side, I'll usually do Tokenol or something, you know, just to give it a really like kind of polished touch. And I was making
Hmm.
myself a little kind of like bag for the car because I lose my keys and my wallet and everything, and my wife yells at me because I can't remember where I'm going or what I'm doing. So it's literally just to throw stuff in so I don't lose
Yeah,
stuff in
yeah,
like the
yeah.
seats. Um, and I used like the token on the back, and this leather in particular had like this most satisfying smooth back that I've like ever seen. It was like
Yeah.
it looked like those edges you see on like Instagram, you know, people like get their like shiny edges.
Oh yeah,
It's what
that
the
whole thing.
flesh side looked like, and I was like, this is like insane. I just took like a, you know, a canvas cloth and just like rubbed it in, and it was like an ice skating rink.
Nice.
It was, like, unreal how easy the backside was to kinda,
Yeah,
like, do that.
yeah. I
I've
mean,
never really done that.
depends on the process and the tannery and what the people wanted. But yeah, they a lot of good finished back leathers out there. A lot of not. Get a fair bag, a fair mix.
Yeah, so you know, I actually really enjoyed working with it, and I actually did 2 different things with it. I did the paint and I did the burnish because 'cause I'm, like, a serial tinkerer. I think, like, I'm, like, incapable of not, like, trying 1,000 different ways on something
Yeah,
for absolutely no reason.
totally.
Um, and it kept a very stiff edge,
Mm.
which I thought was not all of them have it as like it's weird. Like it was like pliable in the middle, but like as soon as you cut it, it had like this glossiness to it that was like stiff.
Weird.
Yeah, I've never like seen it before, and I don't know if it's like something that they put in, but it was like when you give it like a really clean cut, it almost
Mhm.
looked a little glossy before you ever did anything to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, saying that, that's like my biggest difference between hand cutting and clicker cutting. Right? When I cut with a clicker, like the edges are so clean and glossy, especially on thick leathers, um, versus cutting it by hand, which you know the fibers are all like kind of being pulled one direction when you're pulling with a knife, where
Yeah.
just that downward pressure kind of the blade and the pressure kind of cuts it clean and gives it that weird gloss that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's unique. And if anybody listening, if you're wondering where you can find it, I'll link that leather in the episode notes. I don't remember like the full name. I think it was just English Bridal Weaver Select. But if you're looking
Good
for something
stuff.
that can make it was easy to like stitch to, you know, something,
Mm.
it's not going to work for probably every, you know, you got to find the products that it works for you. I found it nice with like medium sized things. I did a 3 to 4 ounce, just like, you know, medium bag. Um,
I mean, everything you're saying, it sounds like a really good leather to start with, right? Like if you're jumping in the craft, maybe I don't know. Like
yeah,
I
like if you
feel
want to
like
go into like veg tan, if you want to take like your
yeah,
first jump into like a veg tan, it's pretty good. And, you know, it's probably going to change as I use more. You know, I've only used there's only so many leathers we can all use, and you don't
yeah,
get to them until, you know, years. It takes years to get through all of them. You know, I just started using Valdebrana and, you know, Butero and all these different goat skins, and it's like they're all different.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they have different like purposes too. Like I find that I really enjoy working a lot with Valdebrana and Butero for small leather goods. I've made myself a bunch of like card wallets and like little wallets for like family members, and I find that is a very easy leather to work with for small leather goods.
Okay,
You know, I just started using that, and I think it's the way that I don't know how they're made, and
yeah. I've never used either, but I've only heard good things. People seem to really, really love them,
they're
especially.
very similar. Like the tan, so I got From Buckle Guy, I got their Valdebrana tan and the like yellowish tan Butero.
Okay.
And if you have them side by side, they look virtually identical.
Wow.
Like there's almost like you can't
Yeah.
tell a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they feel slightly different, but you can't tell the looking at them. You wouldn't be able to pick the two out.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure there. I know in Italy a lot of those tanneries are very close
Yeah.
to each
Yeah.
other. Um,
Yeah. They're all
so it's
generally in the same region, you know?
yeah, and I'm sure they all know each other and work together.
Yep.
Um,
Definitely.
After all these years, you've been doing this for a while. After all these years, what is your favorite part of the craft? What do you look at and
Oh,
still to this point doesn't feel tedious? What do you actually still enjoy doing? Is it the painting aspect? Is it you know, the burnishing? Is it just the final cleaning of it, a nice conditioning, saddle soap? Like what is it
yeah.
that
Yeah.
you still like brings you joy
Um,
that you do?
so I do a lot of different things in the craft, but for like the smaller stuff, I think painting leather is the easiest answer. It's just so enjoyable to me. It's so therapeutic. It's so nice to like be able to make this same bag 100 times over, and every single one not even look remotely like the next, even though they're the exact same patterns. Um, so painting is definitely one of my favorite things. Definitely a really good creative output. It's also like nice because I can take that same tote bag and make that same tote bag for 10 different type of people. You know, people who just want it in black to go to the office, or people with want like a crazy colorful painting on it to wear out at night, and everything in between. Um, that's definitely one of my favorite parts of the craft. Um, but like I said, I do so many different things. So I do a lot of like large corporate orders, right? Like,
Yeah.
get 5,000 keychains with your name on it and stuff like that. And maybe I don't, that's not the most enjoyable, making 5,000 keychains, even though that's like the bread and butter work. But I'd say getting to work with those big clients and sitting down and putting my design school knowledge to work, like how to talk to a client, how to create like different mood boards and different, like all different things, different spec sheets, all like the fun technical creative stuff that I got to bounce back and forth with the client before the product you know, comes to what the final thing is we're making. I think that's really enjoyable. That's like a fun creative thing. Um, it's definitely different than coming up with like miles different than coming up with a new product for my own product line, right? Um, I take such a different approach. You know, when it comes to my own thing, sometimes, I'm not taking the same amount of time or the same amount of effort um, that I do putting into my clients. Not that I'm not putting effort in, right? I'm just doing it in a very like a much more organic way when I come up with my own products. Where with them, it's this super structured way um, of designing goods for them and different iterations and different prototypes and models and everything it could be, and learning who their client is and learning who it goes to. One of my biggest things is like not having waste, right? Not having waste not just in the patterns and like me making something. um, a lot of what I do goes to like trade shows or big corporate events, things like that. And they'll be handing out thousands of these things, and I'm like, do you want your client to keep this product, or is it going to be one of those products where they look at your name and then by the end of the trade show, it's in the trash? Because I don't want to make something that's going to end up in the trash. I want something that they're not going to forget and they're going to use, for the next 10 years, hopefully, because we made something cool and durable um, and beautiful and practical, something they haven't seen before, rather than like a pen with the company's name on it or like whatever stupid squishy toy it is, like you want to have an impression. And for me that's really worked out because I keep getting more clients because of that, because you know their competitors at the trade show will get their giveaway from, or maybe not their competitors, but like, oh, the booth next to us who sells something completely different had this really cool keychain, this really cool notebook, this whatever it is, right? And they didn't forget about it, and they find me and reach out, and that kind of snowballs into each other. So that's a really enjoyable part of the business as well.
You touched upon a thing that I think is very interesting and comes up so often is that you talked about, the prototyping and the mood board and all these things that go
Hmm.
into it that most people are not necessarily paid for.
Hmm.
And it's your time.
Yep.
How do you find that right balance of doing those things and feeling confident in saying this is my upfront cost of my time? And I think of all the people that I talk to, that seems to be always something that comes up is people don't pay themselves. They pay themselves for their time and don't incorporate any profit at all,
Hmm.
or they barely cover their time because they're misquoting. They don't know because they want to get the project, and
Yeah.
companies will exploit that. How have you found that out through your career? That's been the most meaningful steps you've taken.
Yeah, I mean, I used to just say yes to everything, no matter what the price or cost was, just because I wanted work and I wanted to figure it out. But now, very different. My time is just as valuable as theirs, and they're being paid to do this project at their corporation, and I should be paid to be doing this project with them or for them. But I usually have like two to three different trains of payment and thought of how I go about it, and it depends on the client. So every client's different of you know, how we work out a cost. Generally, there's two different costs. There's that design cost, right? The consultation, the design, me sitting down with you, figuring out what you want. And that usually comes in at a much higher cost. You're hiring me as a designer, um, to figure out this product for you, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the manufacturing cost, which is a very different cost because you you paid me to design the one thing, and now you're going to pay me to make the 5,000 a thing. Those aren't equal costs to anyone. Like no one that business would never survive that way. Um, and then there's kind of the in between fee, right? So a lot of the big corporations have their own design teams I get to work
Mhm.
with, which are fun. And like, oh, you design something totally different than I do, but like you're a designer, we speak the same language. This is easy. This is a great relationship. And I don't have to like hold your hand like a 2-year old. Um,
Yeah.
the companies I need to hold their hands like 2-year olds, then that's a whole different ballgame because now I have to do everything. I'm finding materials and picking colors, helping them redesign their logo to fit on it, like things I don't necessarily want to be doing all the time. So that's somewhere in between. But yeah, no, I get need to get paid, need to make a living, need to eat, put a roof over my head. So yeah, it can be tricky, um, finding that balance. But yeah, like I said, it's generally two different trains of thought. Because my time to design for you is valuable. I have the college degree in this. I'm not just some guy making this up for fun. This is what I've dedicated my life to and figuring out. You know.
I think you put it perfectly in the sense that like you're hiring me as a designer first,
Hmm.
then you're hiring me as a manufacturer.
Yeah.
Like you're taking my skill sets separately and you're paying me separately essentially.
Exactly.
Like
They
it's
are.
almost
It's
like
it's two different. It's two different
it's
invoices.
because you're going to pay for a designer no matter what. So it's
Yeah.
either you pay me and have the manufacturer sitting at the exact same table as the designer,
Yeah.
or you pay somebody else probably more,
Yeah.
and you still don't
Exactly.
know if they're going to see eye to eye with the manufacturer.
Yep. Yep. Where I'm
So
I'm both. So
yeah. So if you don't
I
see eye to eye with yourself, then you probably have a
I'm not going to design something that's impossible to manufacture. Or like if you gave me a budget that you want your thing to cost $10 per piece, like I'm not going to make a design that is $15 a piece to manufacture. Like you cut out all that middle bull crap and you don't have to worry about it. All this being said, though, I do work in ways where I'm just a manufacturer, where people come to me and be like, "This is the design," or I have a lot of pre-existing designs that people want. that it's just like put a logo on, right?
Yeah.
Or the complete opposite, where I work as just a designer and we're making 20,000 pieces and I'm not making that because I'm a small shop. And I'll either, it's been both cases where we've either had like local large factories here in New York do it, or they have factories like overseas and they get 20,000 pieces made. And I'm like, please take that. I don't want to think of that.
And you're never going to be able to compete with overseas prices
No,
anyways.
ever, never.
And they probably, the other thing that people don't take into account either is that, like, while it's much cheaper, you don't have to import things when it's here.
Yeah.
Like, you save a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
right off the bat. So while your
You
labor and your products might be cheaper, there's different quality control. There's also different, like, you can get it much faster. I mean, freight has been extremely
yeah,
slow. Things could get stuck at sea
and
for weeks.
and prices of freight have skyrocketed too. So,
Yeah. Freight has not been cheap or friendly.
yeah,
Even like just shipping things USPS has gotten
yeah,
extremely
yeah. I
expensive for
mean, like
people.
the difference, like working with somebody like me, or even the other factories here in New York, which are all great. I have great working relationships with them. Um, you can sit down and have a conversation with us in person at any time, right?
And
Like,
that's unique. It's not a 12-hour
um,
time difference.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you're local.
Or even in the US, right? Like if you're in
Yeah,
California and I'm making something for you, I can ship it to you overnight and
that's
have
true.
that sample in your hand the next day, and it's easy. You don't have to worry about international, shipping cost and it being stuck in customs and all that sort of stuff. It's there when
Yeah.
you get in when you want it, and you can jump on the call on the phone and have a call with me whenever. I'm pretty open and flexible, and it's
No,
the
you're right.
beauty
It's
of
different.
having my own business. It's yeah, it's different. It's different. I mean,
I mean, that
not
that does play a
not to
big factor.
yeah, not saying those factories overseas aren't capable or talented or anything like that. It's just different when it's local. You know.
And I think there's a lot that goes into it too. I've done a more of a nerdy deep dive into, what the ecological expenses are for, like, not even just fast fashion, but like overseas factories where, like, it's not as much of a forethought. There's
Yeah.
definitely an ecological, cost too, that associating yourself with the brand, you also don't know how that's going to reflect on you. Whereas supporting local businesses or,
Yeah.
handmade things, it's vastly different. I
Yeah,
think there's
paying people here living wages instead of slave labor across overseas, depending on where you're coming from, and look at all these factories that have collapsed in all these different countries in Bangladesh, and where thousands of
yeah,
people are working
there was
in
like three different
working
ones in
in yeah,
Bangladesh.
working like thousands of people have died working in garment factories around the world. It's horrible. It's the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters on earth. They're terrible.
I heard something that 20% of the world's pollution is from fashion.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like how many people are on Earth? Look how much useless crap we all buy, and how long it lasts. Like go to H&M and wash that T-shirt twice, and it's garbage.
I know.
um,
I don't even really go to those places anymore. And
no, no,
it's hard
me
for people
neither.
not to, because it's so cheap.
Yeah,
You can get something for
it-
$5. It's hard. But not necessarily
exactly.
saying that price equates quality either. It's not like, 'cause if you
Yeah,
spend $50, it's going to be a better shirt.
yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
there are certain
I've
companies that make better.
definitely, I've really, really got in the habit of trying to look at the labels of things when I buy them, like where they're coming from. Because, like you said, it's like, oh, why is this shirt $70 and made in Bangladesh? They probably paid $2 to have this thing made. Maybe not even. That's being generous. They just put their
Yeah,
logo
no.
on it, and those made in terrible working conditions and factories that are 150 degrees inside. Where people are being
Yeah.
forced to sew garments together. It's not a great situation.
I always had an appreciation for anybody working in, like, factories or things like that. When I was younger, I worked in a like a dry cleaner in the summer.
Mhm.
and it routinely would get 120 in there, like, because you had
Yeah.
all these things
Yeah.
that were all the starches, and they were pressing, so they were pressing with these hot irons all day long.
Yep.
And ventilation just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So I always knew that that was excruciatingly hot, and I can only imagine these larger factories that have 10 times the amount of machines, how hot they must
Yeah.
get. Like
Yeah. I couldn't
the breathing
imagine.
ability must just be insane. I think that those summers took years off my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's I mean, my old shop was like that, non-air conditioned, all windows. Uh, it was like working in a greenhouse. It'd be 110 degrees in the summer. It's miserable. Like you said, took years off my life. got, got heat stroke sitting at the sewing machine. Um, but yeah, I was just looking up. I was trying to remember. It's if I don't know if you ever heard of Fashion Revolution. It's like
Fashion
a
revolution.
should check
What
them
is
out
that?
on Instagram. They're like this global movement to really educate people about the working conditions of the garment industry and how awful it is around the world. And it's like really eye opening and really scary, and doesn't like makes you think about where your stuff is coming from. I think that's a big problem with everything we do and buy, right? Like people aren't thinking about, you just pick something off the shelf and it's yours, and you use it once or twice and great, but like you don't think about where that's coming from, right? Like who made
That's
that
true.
item, what, how many different hands that thing's gone through. um, and I've gone back to this about 8 million times in my life because it was probably the most important lesson. So you've heard this from me before, don't roll your eyes. But in school we had a guest lecturer in, and he put this is like this asking a general question to the room, to the lecture, just like, what do we make, what do we design, like why are we here? And everyone's throwing out all different answers, just from like, oh, shoes, to deep philosophical crap, like ways to make people feel better and all crap like that. um, and at the end of it, he just puts a picture of a landfill up and he's like, no, we're just designing garbage. And we're all like, what? And he's like, you have this item for a year, and then it ends up in a landfill for the rest of its lifetime. Most of the lifetime of that thing you design that went to market is in a landfill. That's what most of its lifetime is, because that's just like how we design and make goods these days, just to be expendable, just to throw them out and buy another one cheaply and not worry about it. So like we're not designing products for people, we're designing garbage, things that end up in landfills. So I've really taken that lesson, to heart my whole life, or well, since I've heard that, my whole career, and really try to put that into my goods. I don't want people to come back and buy a wallet from me every year. I want that person to come back and be like, hey, look at the wallet you made me 5 years ago. I still use it every day. It's the best thing ever. Those are the best conversations. Those are my favorite conversations. Yeah, I tried. I don't want to design junk. I don't. I don't want repeat customers. It sounds crazy, but that's what it is.
No, and I think that's true, and I think it's the other part that kind of goes into it is a lot of things can't be repaired. And I know there's that quote that I don't know who
Yeah.
says it. It's some fashion house, and it's like, you know, luxury is something that can be repaired, not thrown
Hmm.
away.
Yeah.
It's supposed to like
It's
stand the
so
test of
true.
time.
So
Um,
true.
and I think that's why people flock to old machines and
Mhm.
old denim and old clothes, and you wonder why vintage clothes are still around. They were made
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
They were there was
100%.
just there was a different thought to it, and I think in leather, something I take uh, not like homage, but like a respect for is the design process that goes into it, the thought that goes into somebody making a design that you may not think about, of where you need to add support, or you know thicken like an extra layer of leather, or you need to put a buckle, or you need to pull something. There's so many facets that go into goods that the average person doesn't understand or think about. That is like the biggest part of the art form for me, as much as
Mhm.
making the bag is, or making the item. It's the thought that goes into making that perfect bag. A lot of people will make fun of the prices for luxury goods, and while they're expensive, I don't take away from that. And it's you're buying the marketing, you're not exactly always buying the product, but their products to get to the point that they're at is really impressive.
Yeah,
They if you look at like a Hermes bag, they never lose their shape.
yeah,
They always seem to have these certain aspects that clearly there was like forethought in all these different areas.
yeah.
Um,
No, I just experienced this firsthand. I went into a like 2 weeks ago into a Saks Fifth Avenue store, and or like Saks off Fifth or whatever it was, same thing. Um, and as I was leaving, I saw this huge wall of handbags, and I was like, let me go look. I always go look, and then I realized I was like, wait, all these bags are used. They're all secondhand. They have a whole secondhand handbag section. And I was like, the condition of these bags were incredible for how old some of them were. And I was like, all the shapes were perfectly, they were like restored. And I was like, these are just as nice as the new ones. And I didn't even realize they were used. Half of them were used until I read a sign about it. And I was like, what? That's incredible. But it was all like old Louis Vuitton bags and Valentino bags and this and that. And I was like, these are well made.
yeah,
um,
and honestly, like the craftsman, I know there's this woman out in California now. She just does bag repair,
mhm.
and she worked for Hermes for a long time, and it's fascinating the level of craftsmanship they have. But it's the thought that goes into it. It's how they approach the making of the bag, why they do this
Yeah,
part first and this part, and like all these different
absolutely.
facets that you can buy. You can't go and buy a 10-year-old H&M bag.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. But like
No.
some of these high-end bags, the materials you use and the craftsmanship you use against it or with it
Yeah.
matters. Like how you
Yeah,
build
yeah.
it matters.
Yeah.
Um, I the design process made me think of it because of Leanne and Nick had their little design week, and I saw how they were approaching designs, and I was kind of envious. I told them how
Yeah.
the way that they approach things, it's impressive. Like I don't think people appreciate the thought process that goes into it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
One thing I like to kind of ask people is, in 5 years, where do you see yourself personally and professionally? And you can choose not to answer either of them, but if you, in a perfect world, where is Matt in 5 years?
oh
Besides probably
man.
still talking about nonsense with me, where is the ideal place? And I shouldn't ask where for you. It's really, where does your wife want you in 5 years, or your wife to be? Um,
My
where does
wife to
she
be,
want
where
you
does
in
she want?
5 years?
That's a good question. Oh man. I gotta get all deep with you like this. I don't know. I'm at this like weird point in business where I'm trying to like I guess reinvent myself a little and figure that out again for like the second or third time. So I'd like to. I mean, obviously, I'd like to be able to have grown significantly by then. But I hope, I guess, by shop size, we'll go by shop size. I hope my shop is 4 times the size. I hope I have at least 4 employees by then. Get like at least one a year and have some like safe growth. Um, and I hope that the two sides of my business have grown equally. So the side of me manufacturing for people has grown, and that's where like the 4 employees, or maybe 3 of the 4 employees, can work on the manufacturing side, and then me and someone else can just riff the ideas of the new products for my own line. Um, and I really see my own line. I mean, it's already shifted this way to just direct to consumer. So a larger direct to consumer presence um, of well designed goods. But yeah, I just hope it's a sustainable business. You know, monetarily, of being able to afford a comfortable life, and a sustainable business of product, because there's so much change going on in the world of people with sustainability. So definitely pushing towards that notion that leather is and can be sustainable. Um, yeah, but there's a lot, I'm trying to open my eyes up a little bit more and feel like I've had this narrow field of vision lately. So I'm trying to open up and explore and get back to being a bit more creative, rather than just the bread and butter stuff. So, like I said, an equal amount of growth. Where right now I feel like the bread and butter corporate large orders have really taken off for my business. I'd like to have it equal sides of that, and being able to create new bags and new goods for my own brand, for the Mattia brand. Um,
Do you think
I,
sometimes it's the time in your life that shapes the growth that you want? Like, do you think that you base it based on where you are in life, or do you think it's where do you think the business shapes life or life shapes the business?
I think, oof, that's a good one. Maybe life shapes the business, right? I feel like the business can always change, right? Like
Yeah.
I want it to exist forever, but it doesn't need to, right? It doesn't need to be there. So like it could change into something else. Maybe it's not leather goods one day. Maybe the Mattia brand's a pizza shop. No, not something that wildly different. But like,
Now we're talking. I'd love to
but
have a pizza shop.
but it doesn't. I've like as I've grown, I've realized, I don't know, maybe part of my brand is it is just like ego, where it doesn't need to be that. It could be anything. It could be whatever is sustainable, that makes me happy, that puts a roof over my head. And I'm okay with those changes now, as I've grown. I've figured those things out. I'd obviously still like to do what I do. I really enjoy it, and I'm lucky enough to be able to say that I enjoy what I do, and I got to keep growing it, every day. But with small businesses, it's up and down. So one day it's great, one day it's not. We just went through a pandemic that crushed me. All these, my business was on the up and up, and then all like one day it was like, no, it's not. And it was out of my control. That's the thing. I can't control everything, and I can hustle to make things happen, and find different ways of income, but it's not always going to be there. That kind of goes for everybody and everything in this strange world we live in. But
I think the
yeah,
pandemic taught people a lot of things. I think it taught people their resilience. I think it taught
yeah,
people you could take on you even when before the pandemic you thought you couldn't handle anymore. Mother
yeah,
Nature just said, "I got a surprise for you. Hold my
yeah,
drink."
yeah,
And
yeah,
through one more thing, and I think it just shows people who were like, "I don't know if I'm capable of this," and it like if you manage to keep it going,
yeah, yeah,
you're capable of more
exactly.
than you thought, which is
I'm I'm
kind of
still
interesting.
here, still kicking, still moving, uh, still trying to grow, trying to make it happen, forming friendships, relationships. I think friendships like ours were some of the best things out of the pandemic. We found this group of people online we never would have connected with otherwise, and made a community, um, that didn't really exist before the pandemic. It was very small and very people just you know gate kept and didn't tell anybody about anything. And that's how business started for me. Everything was gate kept. Everywhere I went was a door closed in my face because they didn't want to tell some kid who was starting some leather business how to do anything or how to get anything. And I figured it out along the way, and really ground it out. Trying to get
That's
here,
good.
and now I'm like, why? I'm not going to be that person to other people, when people want to learn. But also, like, in my side of it, right? You got to give to get, right? Like, you can't just show up at my door and I'm going to give you all my information. Like, we've got to form some sort of friendship. I got to know that you want it in a way. But there's no way I'd see myself not helping people. There's no point in that. What does that get you, right? Everyone knows something you don't. That sort of mentality. Like, you're gonna learn from me. I'm gonna learn from you. Is the way I take it. You know.
And I think everybody does it differently. I think that's the funny thing is like, in like our group of like people that, we all do leather, but we all do different things. and we
Yeah.
all add very different skill sets and design thoughts. And I think if somebody's going to rip you off, they were going to rip you off anyways. They were going to find a way to find exactly what you do and rip it off. It's not
Definitely.
like what we do as a crafter is the same as IP for an iPhone. It's just not. Like
Yeah.
it's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the goal of what this I hope this podcast does is it allows people to learn about new people, but also learn about different facets about how to do things. I think there's
Yeah.
an information gap, and I hope that this kind of bridges it and connects them with the right people to
Yeah.
be the best version of themselves and be the best crafter they can, even if they're just listening because they have an
Absolutely.
interest in it. I hope you can take something from this and be a better crafter or help you become a better person,
Yeah. Yeah. It could
you
really,
know?
there's so much out there. It's like, why keep it? When I started getting involved in a community of leather crafters, it was at this time in the pandemic where a lot of new crafters were coming in who didn't know anything. And I felt like a lot of people, looked to me and had a lot of questions like, oh, this guy's been doing it a while. And people were reaching out to me left and right. And it was great. And, met a lot of cool people that I get to call friends, get to call them my friends now. But there was like this switch, right? Or I went from teaching people to now those same people teaching me because they were going about their journeys and learning things and doing things different ways that I never thought to do them in all my years. And just like I had my own ways and I was in my lane and, they came like, hey, I tried this way with this tool, or like even the tokenol on the bottle thing, like we were talking about before, things I never would have thought of. And now these people who have been in the craft a year are teaching me, and I never would have learned those things if I wasn't like, sure, I'll show you how to do this in the first place, or gave them a word of advice. So so it's pretty cool. It's never stop learning. That's the biggest part of it. Never think you know everything. There's no one on this earth in leathercraft that I think knows everything. There's so much, so much to knowledge out there, and so much to learn, and so many different things. And every time I think I've learned one thing, like through and through, somebody else just comes by and blows my mind. So yeah, just keep an open mind.
Yeah, and I think for anybody listening, if you're wondering about this tokenol hack we've talked about a couple of times, essentially what it is, and this is how it was explained to me, and Matt, correct me if you do it a little differently. It was about, you know, 50-50 tokenol water, maybe 60-40 tokenol to water, and you put it in one of the markers. I'll put a link in the bio. Buckle Guy has them, and they have them in different sizes too. Um, and they have interchangeable tips. And what they are is they're kind of like you push it in, and there's like a little marble or something inside that kind of moves it around so it doesn't like thicken up. And you just apply it to the edge. You just kind of just slide it across, and it's just like kind of felt, I'd say,
Yeah,
tip. I don't really know
yeah,
what it is.
yeah,
And it makes edge beveling, edge like slicking so easy. It applies just a
yeah,
little bit to your edges, and you can just burnish it in seconds, as opposed to having
yeah.
to take out your tokenol or water burnishing or whatever you're going to do. It's a very
Apply it with
clean,
your
easy way.
apply it with your finger like I used to do.
Yeah,
It's like
I can't
finger's the
imagine going back
easiest.
to that.
Yeah, no, me neither. I'll never go back to that.
And it used
But
to
yeah,
dry out so fast when I used to use the
yeah,
bottle because I'd leave it open for, 30 seconds here, put it on, a minute there, and you open it enough times that it doesn't keep it
goop.
fresh. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it just becomes like thick. But this, because of the water, it like makes it so it doesn't really thicken, and it's just so easy. I believe, I don't know, they're like the larger ones. I bought the big ones because I just like that I didn't have to do different sizes for tokenol. I was like, you know what, it's easy. I'll just get the biggest size possible. But the best part is if it gets to be a different color, you can just swap the tip out for like I think I paid 30 cents when I bought them from Buckle
yeah,
Guy.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
were like unbelievably cheap. They were a couple bucks to begin with,
Yep.
and I think I paid maybe 40 cents for a tip change. Like
Yeah,
it took seconds.
and
So
that's
I'll put a
also
link in there.
what's great about companies like Buckle Guy, right? Like they've formed relationships with us makers and see us using these hacks and doing these things, and then like started supplying the things we need to do these hacks and apply these things that people never thought of before. They're growing with us too, as much as we learn from them. So it's cool to have
Yeah.
companies like them be a part of it.
Yeah, and we appreciate the companies. Right from the jump, we had Buckle Guy, Weaver, Leather Machine Co., OA Leather Supply, and they believed in this idea of listening to the consumer and growing with us. And
Yeah.
a lot of people just don't respond, and they're not interested. They don't see the purpose of that. But these companies actually want to hear from consumers, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that they are interested enough to learn, um,
Hmm.
and grow with us. So I think that's pretty cool. Um,
Yeah.
Matt, I really appreciate you joining me. I think this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Everybody
Absolutely.
should buy from Matt because he's not only a great guy, but he is extremely talented.
I appreciate
And I
that.
know everybody listening to this episode, it's right around Christmas. If you haven't bought your last minute goods, hit up his website. Matt, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, so through my website, Mateo, Mateo, Mattia, Mattia.com, or same name, Mateo Mattia, is my Instagram account, all my social media, and you can hit me up there. Feel free to chat, talk, reach out, whatever. I'm always around.
Yeah, so get that last minute shopping for your loved one. Buy something from his site. Make everybody's year, and support our businesses that support us and allow us to have this show on. Link is in the bio. We don't make any money from the purchases. We just want to help facilitate that and give back to the partners who believe in the consumer and the products that they sell and our feedback. And
Right on.
um, I hope everybody has a amazing Christmas, and we will catch you after the new year. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next month. All right, happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks.